Well, hello everybody. What a pity we don't have smell-o-vision. The tree behind me is an heirloom apple heritage tree called Pumpkin Sweet. It also, if you Google that, it has a dozen other names, but it's a very old variety. It seems to cycle. It has apples every year, but every other year is a good year, and this is the good year, I would say, by the looks of all those blossoms. And I'm sure the microphone isn't picking up the bees, but the sound of the bees, but it is alive with bumblebees right now. Well, I thought I'd give you a little tour around. It's now the second day of June, I guess, so early June. Show you what's happening in the gardens and in the hoopos. Almost everything is planted. I think about the only seeds that I have left to plant are the mooch beans, the heirloom variety of bean. They're going to be planted outside in the same beds that have the garlic in them. There's trellises at the back of those beds, but they like warm soil. We haven't had any really hot weather yet. Still not having any rain. This past Monday was forecast to be a decent rain, and all we got was some drizzle and cloud. And now the forecast is for next Monday and Tuesday to be heavy rain. So I don't know. No rain to washing us out probably, but we'll have to wait and see on that. So let's take a little look around at things. Well, this is the area where I'm growing things in containers just outside of the hoopos. Most everything has been planted. The potatoes, if you can see, have been earthed up once. And now I'm just waiting for them to get up above the level of the pot with their foliage, and I'll do the final earthing up, bringing the soil up to an inch or so from the top. And I have two summer squash varieties. This one is just an ordinary zucchini, and then the other one over there is the one that I've been talking about. It's parthenocarpic, my favorite new word. Doesn't require male blossoms to cross-pollinate. It has all female blossoms and supposedly produces a squash with every blossom. So time will tell. I'm growing them side by side, not in identical pots, but in huge pots full of the same soil mix, the same thing that I used to plant the potatoes in. It's those bags of garden soil potting mix that I bought and mixed with composted cow manure and a handful or two of the organic granular fertilizer, which never seems to want to tell you what's in it, but by the smell of it, blood, fish, and bones, I think, would be a good description of it. And this dear little thing, they came in the mail, tiny little nubs, and now they've grown into a decent size plant. Those are yacon. I've never grown yacon before. I did some research online, not very much, and it's related to the daisy family, it says, but the tuber, the way they describe the tuber, almost sounds like it is similar, sweeter, but similar to Jerusalem artichoke. Anyway, time will tell. It said 25 weeks to maturity. Well, these are never going to reach maturity. Long before we get 25 weeks, and these will be killed by frost sometime in September, and I'll tip them out of their pots and see what's happening. And I have two varieties of cucumbers. I'll put the list, I guess, of everything that almost everything that I'm trying to grow here below this video again. And I've made these little teepees just out of canes. I think the pot is large enough for a single cucumber plant, and I'm sure it will climb. My concern here is the wind knocking it over. So we will have to wait and see what happens this summer as to how many times I have to pick the thing up and straighten it up again. This bed is made up out of the soil or potting mix, whatever, from all of the containers that I used last year, growing potatoes and peppers and tomatoes and whatever in containers. I piled it here in the fall, and then when I cleaned out the hoopos late fall, I put, I think, 6 wheelbarrows of the mixture of shavings and manure out of the hupos in the area. Right now it is planted heavily with my 4 different varieties of squash. I don't remember the names of them here or not, but the Hokkaido pumpkin, curry red squash, butternut squash, Georgia candy roaster squash, and one other which slips my mind right now. Anyway, Waltham butternut squash. Did I say that already? If I did, anyway, there's 4 varieties in there. 2 varieties of cucumbers here on the closer edge, and in the center is a circle of dwarf sunflowers. I have quite a few dwarf sunflower seedlings to plant around. This has been in for about a week. No damage. I planted it heavily, thinking that, you know, cutworms and slugs and whatever will kill part of them. Well, I've had slug bait down there, but I still haven't seen any trails where there have been slugs involved. So this is going to be interesting if they're all running varieties. It's going to be interesting trying to find a way around the rest of the garden if they all take off this summer. Well, it is time to chop and drop the comfrey. I don't know. This is the taller, I guess, of the, yes, this is definitely the taller of the 3 plants. It's probably half a foot taller than the other 2. It's got to be, what, 4 feet tall? And it hasn't bloomed, but these are blossom buds at the top here. And I don't want it to bloom or produce seeds so it will spread everywhere. That's a long ways in the future. You could let it bloom and still cut it down. But amazing how fast the stuff grows back up after you cut it. So it will be chopped into finer pieces a little later on and put around in some of the garden beds. In no time at all, it will be back almost as high. I've never made comfrey tea. Everybody tells me how bad it stinks, and that's enough. That scares me away. Anyway, I will be cutting all 3 of these plants down. You probably can't see the one behind me. And then chopping it into smaller pieces and using it as a mulch around some of the garden plants. This is one of the 2 beds of garlic, complete with the shadow of my GoPro on its tripod. And those are the beds that I plan to plant the munch beans at the back. Well, sometime in the next week or so, I guess. It's still, as I said earlier, it is still a bit on the cool side here. Now this is my no-dig potato patch. And I'm about to, well, you can't say earth up, I'm shaving up, I guess. About to add shavings to plants that are up and tall enough anyway to prevent any of the little tubers that are starting to grow, to prevent them from sunburning. Some varieties came up and grew faster than others, which I suppose is to be expected. I don't know. The end of this row that I'm working in has Pacific russet, and they've been very slow, but they are coming. And also, like everything else in the garden, this could use a little water. I guess it could stand some rain. I have been watering it. Not a lot, but once or twice a week I do some watering. Well, I won't make you watch me do the whole thing here. Bring you back maybe and show you the finished product. There's a row of onions down one side and a row of shallots down the other side. And I'm going to mulch those 2, but just to hold in moisture. But I plan to clear the mulch away from the bulb. I can't imagine that they would want to be covered. They don't like being covered with soil, so I don't think they would like being covered with shavings either. Well, that is the first earthing up, or shavings up, whatever you want to call it. And I have finally used 1 bale of shavings. So like I said, that's somewhere between $5 and $6 a bale, so it's not very expensive. I have prepared already an excuse for why this may fail. I'm just joking. But there may be some damage involved here. Every time I come out here to water or to check on it, I find another mole hole. So there are moles living in this bed. And I don't know if they're going to allow me to grow potatoes or if they're going to eat them this summer. But we won't know until it's later on, time to have a look what's under some of the plants, I guess. I will be, as I said, putting shavings around the onions and the shallots, but I don't think I'll do that just yet. I may wait until the next time that I add more to the potatoes, give the onions and whatever a chance to get established. This is the bed that I had my few winter sowing plants that survived the winter sowing, and they're coming along. Along here, these are 3 broccoli, and this is that dead on. That's the way I pronounce it. That's the way it's spelled. It's all one word. I don't know if they say dead on or what, but it's the dead on anyway. A Savoy type red cabbage, supposedly. This is a smaller red cabbage, and this is one of the Japanese white turnips. And as you can see, it is forming a little white turnip. I must go check and see how big I should let it get before I eat it. And this is the Romanesco type, I think called Veronica, or something like that, of cauliflower, that fancy head of cauliflower. You see all of the white around the base here. I was shaking dipel. I used dipel, a biological pesticide, to control the cabbage moth, and a lid came off of it, and that one got drowned in dipel. It doesn't seem to have hurt it. And this is a row of the turnips, and this is a row of radish, and they should all be harvested, I guess, before I put more brassicas in this bed a little bit later on, probably quite a bit later on. My brassica seedlings are very small. I'll show them to you in a minute here. Another excellent shot of my GoPro shadow, a bit of me. At the back of this row, this bed, is a heavily planted row of the purple podded peas. The bed next to it has them also. They came up very quickly and are growing fast. The rest of this bed is planted in butter beans, which is a small variety of lima beans. Supposedly a bush bean that doesn't require any support, and the beans form in clusters at the top of the plant. I've never grown them before, but they look very interesting, so that's quite heavily planted with them. I think I used like a 6-inch spacing on all directions, but it's only been a day or two, so there's nothing up yet. This is one of 2 benches that used to be in the hoop house, but I took them out and put an extra bed in there to grow more vegetables in there in the summertime. I think when they were made, it's called Southern Pine. I know it's not, treated so that it won't rot or anything. It's just a natural wood. But my, does it ever hold up well? These have been, they were first in a small greenhouse that I had, and that's been torn down and long gone. Then they spent a year or 2 in the hoop house, and they've been out here for 2 or 3 years, and they still look good. But I use it as a table to put my seedlings on. It's too hot in the hoop house for most of these plants because they're brassicas. I won't bother to name them all off, but these ones here are all brassicas. Same ones that you just saw in the previous clip. These are leftover squash plants. Just in case something dies, I can pop those in, I guess. What's happening there? That looks like it had oh, that's what's happening there. A little worm, a little green worm. Isn't that lovely? A little squashed green worm. I've never seen those before. Maybe I need to shake a little dipole here too. But anyway, in case I lose something in the garden, I can replace it. And if not, I give them to friends and neighbors and whatever. This little pot, I have tried twice to grow celeriac from seed this year. In the winter sowing, nothing came up. And this is a little pot with the remainder of the seeds, and there wasn't a single germination in it either. So I guess I'm not meant to grow celeriac. These are hollyhocks, and they're at least a biennial. Sometimes they're perennial, but they're at least a biennial, so they won't bloom this year, but they're going in various locations in the garden. And these are the dwarf sunflowers that I've been talking about. Again, I'll probably give some of those away. I've got to be potted on into larger pots soon. But I'm going to put them down the center of that bed that has the potatoes in that we just came from, because they don't grow terribly tall, 2 to 4 feet. It's a mixture of different colors and whatever. Now let's go have a look at the other table. Now this is the second table. The window box type things here off to the left, those are planted with Salanova lettuce and nothing up yet. They've only been planted for a couple of days. The larger one is the seed I had left over from last year, which was one well, they come in little tubes like medicine comes in. One container, but it was all mixed varieties. And these ones are the new seed from this year. I have Oakleaf and one called Incised. I don't know if I can't remember now if I planted a tray full in each one or if I alternated, but anyway, this is how I hope to grow my lettuce, up here on these tables away from the slugs. And these, I can't take credit for this at all. You're thinking, well, why would you want to, by the looks of it? But these are those little packets of wildflower seeds that companies keep giving you, along with one or two other little packets of seed that I got as a bonus from ordering from someplace. Diane Munn, if you don't watch Diane's channel, look up Diane Munn. She has an excellent channel. She's a former professional greenhouse grower and seller, whatever, and now is, I guess, retired or semi-retired. She certainly still works hard, but she just sprinkled these in trays. And then plans are, she's probably already planted hers, mine will have to be planted soon, is just to take plugs and put them here and there wherever you'd like to see these flowers blooming in the summertime. I have scattered the wildflower seed packets before and you never see anything, so I'm thinking this is going to work quite well, Diane, if you're watching. And you probably can't hear that, it's too far away. In the background, one of my bobwhite quails, the male quail, is over there doing his bobwhite call this morning. That was him again, but as I say, this microphone probably doesn't pick it up. Anyway, these are Cosmos, and I recognize some other things in there as well. They're not exactly what I would call a wildflower, but it will be fun to stick them around and see what blooms later on. Well, this is sort of an overview of the hoop house. I'll take you and show you a few things of interest before I leave. Looking through two of my very fancy trellises here. You can probably see on the left side there's like a bandage on the end of that one. It's just a folded up mass of spawn budded road cover, fleece, whatever you want to call it, just to prevent the 2x4 from going through the plastic. There's one on the other side as well. I'll show you what's planted at the base of these in a few minutes, but you can see down back far enough there the grapevines have leaved out and actually have their small clusters of blossom buds starting to form. So I'll try to show you those before we get out of here, but let's have a look at a few other things in here. This is a look down at my new acrylic cold frame, which thankfully has a removable top, which is in the basement for the summer. And it's, I wouldn't call it flimsy, but I'm scared I'll break it by moving it. It wiggles all over the place if you pick it up and try to move it. So I've left it here with no top on it and just planting inside of it. There are 4 of the Japanese eggplant. Once again, they'll be in the list down below if you want to know the variety, planted in there. And 2 of the globe basils, which aren't looking very globe-like. They were grown under lights in the house all winter, and I just kept trimming off and using them. But they seem to have survived the transplant, so I will leave them there. And you can see that pot off to the left over there. That's got more globe basil coming up in it that soon will be transplanted into individual pots for growing on later in the season. Impossible to see, I'm sure, because they are so tiny, that the wet area in front of you was planted last night, transplanted with the 3 varieties of beets that I'm growing. And I think on the list below it doesn't give you the names of them. I just bought a variety pack, but it's first crop, Detroit Red, and then one of those varieties that's cylinder shaped. I've never grown those before. But what I wanted to speak about here, they're coming through fine. They were, as I say, just transplanted last night, and none of them seem to have wilted in here so far today, so I think the majority of them will make it. I prepared this bed, once again, as it says to do on the seed packet from Venice, including adding wood ash. I save the wood ash out of the cabin every summer and add it to wherever I'm planting beets. I don't know if anybody else does that or even has wood ash available, but since I've been doing it, I've had the best luck I've ever had growing beets. So these beds in here have had to be refreshed, most of them this year. I added bags of that soil mix that you saw me use earlier. I've bought 30 bags so far and 30 bags of composted cow manure, and I have 1 of each left. So added that to this, added lime, agricultural lime, and added some of the granular organic fertilizer and mixed it in and then planted. The area further beyond, up to the left there, that's dry, I'm going to direct sow beets in that. I'll let these ones grow for a couple of weeks yet, and then I'll plant that area with direct sown beet seeds, and that way sort of have a rotation crop here, or successional crop, I guess would be a better way of describing it. My chard and weed patch is looking a little bit better. The chard is starting to get some larger leaves, so I guess that's going to survive, Alan. I'm saying Alan because Alan Williams in England sent me the seed. I've also transplanted some of them out into the garden outside of the hoop-house. And I've ordered and haven't received yet, but something called perpetual chard, which I'd never heard of before. But thank you, if you know who you are out there that made that comment. I'm anxious to give that a try, so I'll be starting some of those as soon as they arrive. And to the right there are the crown peas, which still have not bloomed, but at the top of each plant now there is the cluster that will become the blossom. So in next week's video, hopefully I'll show you the crown peas in bloom. This is the beta grapevine, the one that produces grapes for me. I'm trying to think of the name of the other one. I can't right now. I say every year if it doesn't produce, this year is going to be its last year. Once again, it's got blossom buds on it over there. Whether I'll see a grape on it is another matter. But this cluster here, that's what they start out like. That's a cluster of grapes that haven't bloomed out yet. But what I'm trying to show you is this. Hopefully that's showing up. The holes in that leaf. They were caused by a little thing I would call a beetle. If anybody out there knows what it is, let me know. Tiny little creature, shiny, black, almost, like purple in the light when the light hit it. And as soon as I touched one, it would jump off and go down on the ground. It doesn't seem to be too much of an issue with the newer leaves that are coming out now, but the first leaves are like lattice work. I guess that gives you a decent view of the other bed. Running down the center of those smart pots, the ones in the center, are 9 tomato plants. I'm growing 3 varieties, and I've saved 3 each for myself here. And then either side of them are I think it's 5 varieties of peppers that I'm growing, some of which already have fruit because they already had small fruit when I brought them out, so I'll try to get you a close-up of that next, I guess. And then behind them, over on the far wall, is the alpine strawberries. Lots of blossoms, quite a few green ones, and I've had 3 or 4 ripe ones, but they're coming along. I don't know. I think the color should be a bit darker, so I'm thinking I'm going to give them some of that organic fertilizer soon. My pepper plants are sort of in recovery. When I first brought them out, I think I got them wet during the heat of the day, and some of the leaves scalded, as you can see there. I'm picking them off as they grow new leaves, and they do seem to be growing new leaves. I think the 3 that you can see along here, the 2 or 3, are lipstick, sent to me by Kevin in Ontario. Thank you very much. The seeds. I've never grown lipstick before, but I can show you out. This one has a couple of quite small, but that's because they were in the house, I suspect. And this one over here is interesting. It's still lipstick, but it has round ones on the bottom, and the ones on the top, I don't know if you can see it or not, but they're growing more the shape of a jalapeno, and it's still supposed to, well, it's got 2 different shapes on the same plant, so interesting to see what happens there later on in the summer, I guess. This is back at the front of the hoop house with those 2 beautiful trellises of mine. The one on the left, you can see the seedlings probably, those are Oka melons. And they've started growing their 3rd leaves since I transplanted them, so they're doing okay. On the right, nothing's up yet. It's the asparagus bean, also called the yard-long bean. And, well, outside here, I don't know. They like heat, so they wouldn't be germinating outside yet, but it's nice and hot in here. So I've only been in for a few days. I look for them to germinate soon. And before I get out of this very hot hoop house, I've had the fan shut off. I got to turn that on too before I leave. It doesn't really control the heat much, but it keeps the humidity down, which is important. You don't want to have a lot of high humidity. It can cause many fungal problems, I guess. These are the figs, or one of the figs, and they are producing a few early figs, not many. There's one there. There's another one around up in here that you can't see because I'd have to turn the branch, and you can't do that. As I probably know, I have 2 fig trees that I pamper and bring through the winter. They never have any great huge crops, but the figs have 2 flushes of figs. The early ones that come out at the same time the leaves come out, and then later on in the season there'll be a few more. So hopefully we'll get a few ripe ones. Well, to close this video off, just a little look at my elevated bed here on the deck. These are the Italian flatleaf parsleys that I planted, and they've done okay. And that's another one of my globe basil that isn't really globing anymore. And these are radishes. Nothing there big enough to pull yet, but they're coming along nicely. I can see little bulbs starting. My tiny Tim tomato way down in the center has got tiny little blossom buds starting. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's 2 of those, one here and one behind there, that are Salanova lettuce plants that I planted in. Well, everything, I guess most everything in here was planted from seed, but those were planted in here from seed. And these are the white turnips again. One of the rosemaries that I grew from seed this past winter, and this is a curly chervil that I bought at a garden center. There are 2 of the Boothby's blonde cucumbers, one here and one over in that corner. I'm hoping, may end up having to pull them out, but I'm hoping when they start to vine I can just drape them down over into the rest of the garden, and that will work. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and that will conclude this lengthy look at the garden in early June.